Hello and welcome. I'm Tara Kelly, Vice President of Policy and Programs for the Municipal Art Society of New York, and I'm delighted to kick things off for this evening's Person, Place, Thing program. Before we get started, I'd like to draw your attention to the chat where the MAS team has placed some helpful tips and information. I would also like to highlight that there is a Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. There you can input any questions for Yeohlee, which will be addressed as time allows later in the program. Tonight's Person, Place, Thing installment looks a bit different than our last one in 2019, when we were joined by author Jennifer Egan for an in-person conversation at the Center for Fiction. We are still unable to gather in the ways we once did. However, we are glad to continue sharing conversations that celebrate our city and the people, places, and things that weave meaning into our daily lives. It is now my pleasure to introduce our host, Randy Cohen, who began his career writing humor pieces, essays, and stories for newspapers and magazines, including The New Yorker, Harper's, The Atlantic, and Young Love Comics. His first television work was writing for Late Night with David Letterman, for which he won 3 Emmy Awards. His 4th Emmy was for the work on Michael Moore's TV Nation. For 12 years, he wrote The Ethicist, a weekly column for the New York Times Magazine. His most recent book, Be Good, How to Navigate the Ethics of Everything, was published by Chronicle. And joining Randy as our guest tonight is Yeohlee Teng, award-winning fashion designer and founder of House of Yeohlee. Yeohlee's work has been featured in numerous exhibitions worldwide and is part of the permanent collection of the Victoria and Albert Museum in London and the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. Yeohlee's collection is, and it always has been, designed, developed, and produced in New York City. Her book, Yeohlee, Work, was published in 2003 and surveys the first 20 years of her practice with essays by prominent fashion, art, and design curators and critics. She is the recipient of the Smithsonian Cooper Hewitt National Design Award for Fashion in 2004. In 2010, Yeohlee NY, a made in New York retail store, was established in the Garment District. Today, her store and workroom are located at 12 West 29th Street in the Nomad Flatiron neighborhood. I'll also add that Yeohlee is very proud we're proud to have her as a member of our board of directors at MAS. And so Randy, I leave things in your capable hands. Welcome, Yeohlee. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tara. Yeohlee, you're, I don't see you. Ah, there you are.
Hi.
So,
how are you?
I'm mediocre. I'm no worse than my neighbors, and so I don't feel I'm entitled to complain, but I secretly complain. No, we shouldn't mess about. Tell me, who is your person?
Miss Valerie Steele, the one and only.
Explain to people who don't know who she is, who she is.
Valerie Steele is first and foremost an authority on fashion, a curator in charge of the museum at the Fashion Institute of Technology, and a renowned writer and critic. And she is the publisher of Fashion Theory. And what more can I say?
Well,
brilliant mind.
We've got another 13 minutes for this segment, so I hope you can say a great deal more. So she is, I think, most prominently now the curator of the FIT Museum, which is a fantastic place, right? When did you first learn about that museum?
I guess I always knew about them because, you know, it's a part of being in fashion. There is, you know, the museum at the Fashion Institute of Technology. There's the Met, the Costume Institute. And then there's the museum at the City of New York. And those were the places that you went to if you were a student of fashion.
What's at the Museum of the City of New York? That I didn't know about.
Well, it used to be run by Phyllis Magidson. She's no longer with the museum, unfortunately. But they have a superb collection of, I mean, if you're interested in the history of costume in New York City, they have a fabulous collection.
Do you mean costume in the sense of costumes used in theatrical productions, or costume in the sense of fashion in general?
I think clothes that people wear.
Ah, okay. So, let me drag us back to Valerie Steele. So she's maybe the leading intellectual of fashion now, I would say, or you could make a case for it, right?
She is, undoubtedly.
Yeah?
Yeah.
When did you study her when you were a student?
Not really. I don't recall doing that. I think that I became familiar with her work through her writing and through all the exhibitions that she put together.
Ah,
But most, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
All right. So she goes, when she was a student, she goes to Yale to get a PhD in modern European cultural and intellectual history. Like, she had no idea she was going to, that fashion would become her life. And then one of her fellow students did a report on Victorian corsets, and her world changed. And she ended up writing her dissertation on the erotic aspects of Victorian fashion. And that led to her first, I think her greatest hit, in my opinion, her big book, The Corset, A Cultural History.
You know, I have an intern fellow now, and that's her Bible, her go-to.
The Corset book.
That's right.
And so what is it about that book that made it so important?
I think it covered ground that never was covered before. I think that Valerie has intellectual curiosity and a certain way of looking at things that's her own perspective.
But the corset, as I understand it, has largely gone out of style. Why do you think that is?
I guess it's, I would say fashion comes and goes, but I haven't seen the corset come back yet.
Oh, you
But
sound so hopeful.
Who knows about the post-COVID era?
Really?
know,
You think?
No, I don't. Not seriously.
It's never
I mean,
coming
women
back.
are so used to their freedom, but I won't say never because you never know.
But the corset to Valerie meant was all bound up with being all bound up. It was about being restricted, yeah?
Yeah, but you know, corsets were never my thing. I am the sarong girl, and so is she.
Wait,
I mean, we bonded over that. A piece of cloth.
Yeah?
Yes.
How so? Say more about that.
Well, Valerie has a great and diverse collection of sarongs, and I am proud to note that she has at least 5 or 6 of mine. So it requires great talent to wear a sarong well. And I fell in love with Valerie because she speaks Bahasa better than I do and wears a killer sarong.
How do you wear a sarong wrong?
It slips right off you.
Oh yeah, that
not
would be a
careful.
warning sign
Yes.
in any
And
garment.
you're
I think
not supposed to wear a belt, so think about that.
Oh. And the sarong, can we see the sarong as the opposite of the corset then? That it allows a freedom of
Yes.
movement.
Absolutely. Plus, the sarong is for men, it's for women, it's for children. It can be worn as a skirt. It can be worn under your armpits as like a little wrap. And, you know, it's really a garment for all seasons.
So does the sarong then do away with the gendered split in fashion? Was it
Well,
men
it
and
could.
women wear it?
Yeah, men and women wear it, but there's the distinction. Like in the Orient, well, not in the Orient, but specifically in Malaysia and Indonesia, the women's sarongs are very beautiful and very ornate and waxed and floral. And then the men's sarongs are more ikats, you know, they are woven in madras patterns and they are masculine looking.
So sarongs are gendered.
In that manner, they don't have to be. If you wear if you have a sarong that's black, it fits, you know, then it's genderless. But they use the patterns to distinguish from child, man, woman, but it's really up to you. I mean, I used to run around in my brother's sarongs, so there you go.
Valerie performs in some ways the role that critics perform in the arts. And in my view, you can't have a lively musical culture unless really smart people are writing about music. The same thing for art. Is that her role, and does it affect what people design?
I think that she has influence, but I really can't say about how and why people design what they do, but her thinking is absolutely interesting, fascinating, I would say, because she's working on a book now on the psychology of fashion. Now, I think that that is something that you can really wrap your head around or not, but it sounds intriguing because how do you think about that?
Is this from the perspective of the person wearing the clothes or the person designing the clothes?
I'm not sure. You'd have to ask her because the book's not finished yet. But I think it investigates issues like exhibitionism, maybe people who hide from their clothes, and people who use clothes to reveal an ankle or the nape of their neck. But these are conjectures because I haven't had an in-depth discussion with Valerie about the book, except that I am enthralled by the concept.
Is it right to say that each era fashion exposes a different part of the body?
Again, another question from Valerie Steele.
I just meant in general. I just meant in general.
No, but she would have a really informed answer to that. You know, I can just tell you what I think.
Oh, I'd like to know what you think.
Well, I think that it's engendered in the eye. It's up to the person what they decide to play up or play down.
So it's not a broad cultural thing, like in the early 20th century in America, people focused on this part of the body or that part of the body. You think it's more of an individual thing?
I do, but that's my practice. I mean, there are people who follow and there are people who strike off on their own. Okay. And I'm very much marching to my own tune.
Do you think fashion has less cultural cachet, is given less intellectual import than other kinds of design, than like say, oh, I don't know, architecture? There's another world of design. Both groups of designers are making utilitarian objects, but architecture seems to have higher status, or is that just me being a snob?
Well, you know, the groundbreaking exhibition, which happened in 1982 at MIT, was titled Intimate Architecture, Contemporary Clothing Design. And everybody was up in arms about how fashion was co-opting architecture to legitimize their trade. No, 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 they got it really wrong. The curator was talking about clothing as the first shelter that you build around yourself. And to somebody who's too obtuse to get that, it's like the turtle.
Just like the turtle.
That's right.
Where there's no distinction between clothing and architecture. Your shirt is your house.
That's right. And so, your coat could be your tent.
Your coat could be your tent. But that people were up in arms over this exhibition suggests that cultural critics condescend to fashion designers in a way they don't to architects.
There's a certain bias that is really, some of it is based on being a snob, you know, because really, sorry, I got distracted. I don't know, but I'll go back to intimate architecture because the exhibition was groundbreaking. It had designers like Giorgio Armani in it, Curator, amongst, and then myself too. I was in the show. I happened to have the poster invitation, an outfit of mine, and I was on the cover of the catalog, which was photographed by Robert Mapplethorpe. And it is now a collector's item.
I should think so.
And the exhibition was groundbreaking because it influenced and begot the exhibition that LACMA had that was curated by Brooke Hodge. And I can't remember the name of it, but it was in recent history.
And can you describe what effect it had on the fashion world? When you call it groundbreaking, what happened? How did it change people's thinking?
It was groundbreaking in that design became taken more seriously, and that's where Valerie comes in as well. All her writing helped as much to do that. But you know, fashion and architecture, they really, both things deal with the same thing. They deal with shelter. And right now, I understand that great advances have been made at the Media Lab at MIT, where they have developed clothes that are grown from mushrooms and vegetables and such. And I think of clothing actually as the first shelter that you put on yourself. And really, food and shelter are the two basic needs in life, right? So food is one thing, shelter is clothing or architecture. And perhaps one day there'll be one. Maybe one day we will grow our own clothes.
And eat all our clothes? And eat our house? And eat us out of house and home?
I love that.
We're not going to get a better ending than that. So let's move on and talk a little about your place. What is your place? Or I guess, where is your place?
I thought that we might have a nice chat about the Garment District, since you had a studio close to the Garment District as well. Also, I remember.
Well, studio is too fancy for it. When I was in 1973, I think, when I moved to New York, I sublet Carolee Schneemann. Do you remember Carolee Schneemann? She was an important artist of the time. And I sublet her loft on 29th Street between 6th and 7th. And all day long, but it was the studio for her, but not for me. I was just some guy. But all day long, yeah, furriers and florists were wheeling stuff by the building all the time. Is that the neighborhood you mean?
Well, the Garment District roughly is the border of north of 35th Street, south of 40th Street, from 5th to 9th Avenue originally. That was the area, I think it was maybe 6,000 square feet, that was really preserved one-to-one as the Garment District to help sustain industry and showrooms.
And at its peak, that area was filled with people designing clothes and manufacturing clothes, yes?
Yes. And wheeling them up and down the street, rolling bins full of fabric. And it was a real hive of activity. And today, because of COVID and other things, it's a shadow of its former being.
Was it, I think, on its decline as a center of fashion, even pre-pandemic, yes?
Yeah, I think so. You know, the things have changed dramatically.
How so?
Oh, it started with the first garment that got sewn abroad. You know, we shipped our manufacturing offshore, and you know, we don't put a value in things that are made not just close to home, but there's something to the making of things that has to do with the arts and crafts of the discipline. So if it's just mass manufactured and the bottom line, it becomes something else. It's a product rather than a design.
But and you were eager to locate your workshop in the district, and you're still there, I think, yes?
No, I think I started my business in the photo district. I had a loft on 5th Avenue and 20th Street. And Irving Penn was down the street from me.
Man, that's pretty cool. Did you see Irving Penn on the street?
No, but I've seen him sweeping his studio.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Because I pictured him as like littering, and I can't picture him sweeping.
Well, he
I
was
was so
really.
wrong.
Anyway, so I started my business down there, and I had a rep that was on Fifth Avenue and 57th Street. So I wasn't very near to the garment district, but eventually I did end up there because of necessity. You know, it just was a lot of time you spent commuting from your studio, riding your bike up to the factory, riding your your bike over to the showroom, and you know, it was a nightmare.
Well, you've won my heart because you're getting there on your bike. I'm devoted to that. So now I like you even more. That's pretty great. So is part of what makes clustering a set of businesses in one place is that you run into other professionals in your field and ideas get exchanged.
Yeah, it was a real hive of activity. And I remember stories about going to the counter of Horn and Hardit and sitting next to Norman Norell. It never happened to me, but I love those stories.
Well, yeah, but isn't that one of the great benefits of having fellow professionals within 2 blocks of each other, just so you'll have those kind of run-intos?
Yes, yes, it was really great. And then when 9/11 happened, you know, the tents were there now. They were having shows in Bryant Park. And
Yes.
I had my show at 11 o'clock that morning. And I remember walking over to the tents to Bryant Park to see what the hell was going on. And as I crossed 6th Avenue, the first building came down. So I knew it was all over. And then I remember having a conversation with my then public relations expert, with Mr. James LaForce, and we had a conversation that indeed the shows had to continue and go on, because if we don't show, they would have won. So a cohort of us got together and we decided, because of proximity, which is exactly what the garment district is about, we decided that the designers that were in 557th Avenue and the designers in 537th Avenue could put 2 days of shows together back to back. And I remember the PR directors communicating with each other, between Michael Kors, Donna Karan, Yeohlee, and whoever. Oh, and Carolina Herrera, which is where the Vogue Fashion Fund started, because when we put our calendar together, she offered her showroom to the smaller, younger designers who did not have a showroom to show in her space. And that was the birth of the Vogue Fashion Fund. And I really salute her for doing that.
And this sounds very much a product, as you say, of having people in physical proximity to one another, so something like this can happen.
Yes, I think that it was really important. It was really, I don't know, it was a different place and time.
I would think also important because if you're going to have a fashion business and you're going to make stuff there, you need people with the skills to actually make the clothes. And if there are many garments being many businesses in the area, well, then there's also a big crew of skilled work people.
Yeah, I remember looking out my window into the workroom of Ralph Lauren's. And at lunchtime, all the tailors would get together, smoke their cigarettes, and play poker.
It's great.
It was wonderful. It was wonderful. And then you'd go outside for lunch, and there would be like a gaggle of like mostly Italian pattern makers, you know, just shooting the breeze, smoking. Smoking was a lot of it.
You think it's smoking and affordable loft space.
Right.
How can fashion function without both of those things? Well, do you see the effect on, how is it now that it's a less centralized business? How does that work now?
It's hard to say, because a year has probably made a drastic change, but I haven't been on the ground there so much. And I think that in order to really address that, I would have to do a walkabout. But from what I know, not everybody's back. And our production continues overseas. So, you know, I think that Made in New York we're still made in New York, by the way. But, you know, I have a space on 29th Street and I have a sewing room in the back. So we are really, you know, able to continue doing Made in New York. But go ahead.
You speak of the garment district nostalgically and a bit wistfully, that it was a wonderful era and a great way to live and work, but it's gone.
It is. I mean, what it was, the whole structure of it and the environment, the atmosphere, the restaurants. I mean, you know, all of it's gone. And the workers are gone. You know, you have, you know, my first tailor used to work at Calvin Klein and he left me all his tools. But he was like an artisan. I mean, he had this block of wood that he used to hit the coats with before he pressed them. I mean, what a craftsman. I don't know, you know, I don't know what the craftsmen of today do, but I know that a lot of work is being laser cut. And a lot of the sewing, I mean, a lot of sample room, I mean, there are no sample rooms anymore. A lot of designers send a tech pack over to Asia or wherever, and they get garments in return. So that proximity to creativity is a little chopped up. I'm sure it exists in a different world, which is the world of tech.
Do you think we're being sentimental that it's the current system is not better or worse, it's just different? Or is it really worse, which is what I think?
No, it's different. And
just
I think
different.
It's different and it can be better. Why do we have to cut and sew? Why can't we grow our own clothes? I can make the molds, I can size them, and we can grow the garment around it, make a tent, whatever. The way we think about how things are made has to radically change because our world has radically changed. So I think that anything's possible, but the possibilities are not only interesting, it's quite exciting to think about the future of shelter. I can't call them clothing alone, and certainly you can, some of it is fashion, but a lot of it is just really practical workwear or shelter.
So if you had the power to bring back the garment district, you would not do it, I think. It's holding back thinking.
I mean, I think that you have to think about the factory of the future. What does it look like? Are you going to be growing your fabric on the roof? You know, it doesn't, I don't have an answer, but I do know that there's a frontier pushing on clothing. Like recently, I can't remember the manufacturer, maybe it was Hermes, you know, they came out with a bag that's made out of mushroom. So how about that?
Pretty cool. So is it the end of any kind of fabrics based on petroleum?
I think that it's a reach to say that. I think that things happen either like in one fell swoop or in increments. And I don't know where we're at because in this year of interruption, there is a lot of catching up to do with some of like my mills that I work with who have looms from like 100 years ago. I don't know what happened to them. We haven't heard from them. So, you know, it's a very vast network that's very, very complex. And it reaches from the least expensive to the most expensive clothing. So you have all these stratas of workers and fabric. Like it's like a little step ladder and it's very hard to decipher, but I can't wait for things to come back so that I can find out more.
So are the garment factories of today, or up until a year ago, with their 100-year-old looms, very much like the garment factories of a century ago? It's old-fashioned manufacturing techniques?
Oh, the old machine equipment is for fabric. There's a mill that I work with called Tabroni, and they own all these ancient machines that made very, very luxurious silks. And I know that some of that stuff has been cast away, but I don't know exactly what happened to them. And I did hear rumors that the Japanese wanted to buy them up, but the equipment was so heavy that the cost of shipping them was price prohibitive.
The garment district in New York was never a fabric manufacturing district, right? It was a clothing manufacturing.
We had mills that sold made in America woolens up until I think the 70s. And they would be making their factories, their fabric in Massachusetts, in the Northeast corridor. And they would sell them in the garment district. One of them is called Anglo Mills. The other one was Forstmann Wools. There was a Jasco jersey. And I'm sorry to say that Howard Silver just passed away, and he had the best mat jersey mill in the world.
Well, sure. The first factories that we would recognize as factories in America were knitting mills in Massachusetts.
Right.
And New England was, it's where trade unionism found its first foothold. It was the first place where vast numbers of women were employed to work in these mills under terrible conditions. So fabric gets made in New England and shipped to the garment district in New York, where clothing gets made.
Yes. But we did give away our textile industry. You know that.
Say that again.
I said we've given away our textile industry. It's non-existent now. And pretty soon, if we're not careful, we will have completely given away our garment industry. But
I like to end every segment on a note of despair. And I think we've arrived at that note. So,
but before we completely close off on this topic, we should commemorate the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, and the anniversary is on March 25th.
Oh, it is March 25th. Thank you for mentioning that. Not in the garment district that we're talking about, down by the NYU campus.
Yeah, the building is NYU, I think, chemistry labs. But there is a plaque there, and Deborah Burke, and she was in charge of the committee that selected the winners, and I was part of that committee.
Oh, to design the plaque to commemorate
to select the winner.
Wait, the winner of the
there was a competition. Sorry, there was a competition to design a commemorative plaque that would go up.
Oh, and you were on that committee. Oh,
yeah, with Deborah Burke.
Very cool. Very cool. I hate to move into an area where there might be optimism, but let's try it anyway. So
now, what's with you and pessimism?
Oh, I just think it's a bleak world, and I have a bleak view of it. It's just, it's just.
You wouldn't be doing this if you really believed that.
We have to do something.
Well, you convinced me that this was a fun conversation.
We're having fun, right?
Yes. So that's not pessimistic. That's optimistic.
Even with bleakness, yeah. So, Yeohlee, what's your thing?
Well, we talked about my thing being light. Like the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. You know the old joke, it's the light of the oncoming train. It's not my joke.
I love that. I love that.
But light in what sense?
Without light, there's no life.
Yeah.
And I think that everything that we do requires some form of light. When you paint, the lighting matters. When you shoot, the lighting matters. And when you get up in the morning, it's important that it's light out. Can you imagine getting up every day in the dark?
Yeah, you do it all in the winter. I do it every day in the winter.
And everybody's always depressed in the wintertime.
Quite right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you mean light also in regards to your own work?
Yeah, I shoot some of my work, and lighting is really important. I play around with light and shadows a lot.
Mm.
And maybe some of it has to do with my childhood. You know, in my part of the world, wayang kulit is an art and a craft. You know about shadow puppets, right?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
and you know, I grew up viewing light that way as well. That it's a performance art because you use skin and you put holes in the skin for design, and then you shine a light on it and you move the puppets around.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating.
It is. When painters are very particular, as you were, I think, alluding to about the light in the room where they're working, does the light where you're designing matter?
Yes. You know, I face the street. I'm facing the street right now, and all day long, I'm taken by the different qualities of light and color of light that goes on outside. Not within anybody's control, but certainly fascinating. And I think the light really affects your moods. Like a beautiful day, you know, makes everybody happy. And what is it about the beautiful day? It's the quality of the light as well, or mostly the quality of the light, however you want to put it.
So you're mindful of the light when you design. You're mindful of the light in the space when you're designing. Do you think about the light where people will be wearing the clothes?
Oh, absolutely. Especially if you're dealing with materials that are translucent. So you think about how much light is going to fall where and when. So it becomes a tease.
And the assumption is always that clothing is going to be worn under artificial light? Are you thinking about people wearing them indoors?
You know, the way I think about clothes is kind of not necessarily in that fashion. I tend to think about clothing as how useful is it going to be and how long can it last, which is contrary to clothes as accoutrements, where you make statements about who you are, your status in life, or the occasion that you're celebrating. I'm more in the utilitarian kind of mode.
Oh, you surprised me, because I thought, I mean, the clothes can't fall apart, but I wouldn't have expected that emphasis on the utilitarian. Beauty,
Well,
yes.
Say that again?
Beauty, absolutely, but
Yes.
so you think you make utilitarian ideas central in your work?
No, I just like the clothes to be useful.
Uh-huh.
You know, that's really the basic thing. But I will tell you an interesting, well, to me, an interesting anecdote. I got a call from a client, and she owns something of mine that's called a double coat. And the one part of the double coat, the first part, had worn out. And she still has the second part, which she loves to death. And she said, Yeohlee, I don't know if you can help me out. I've had the coat for 20 years, but I really want to replace the outer shell. And guess what? I was able to do it for her. But the interesting thing about that story to me was a week later, somebody walks into the store and asked me the same question, and she had the same coat.
Ooh.
I know, it was weird.
Ooh. When you chose light as your thing, I wondered if you weren't getting at something more spiritual. That light is a central image, and I guess almost every religion uses light as a central image. You know, Jesus said, "I am the light of the world." In the Old Testament, we have Israel as a light unto the nations. Did you mean light in that sense too?
No, I'm thinking about it in a very direct way, because you know you need light to see. But what do you see in what kind of light? Like, you know, you can look at one object, as the light changes, the object changes. it has facets, right? So there are elements about light that fascinate me that have to do with an abstraction, you know? It's like you walk by something every day, and then suddenly at the right moment, you see something that you've never seen before because the light hit it at a certain angle and magic happens. So it's this like ethereal quality of light that appeals to me.
When you design, are you mindful that the light will change on the garments?
Yes and no. I can introduce something else into this conversation, which is when I make something, sometimes I think about the sound it'll make.
Oh,
And
how so?
I made a cape and it had points on it. And I put bells at the bottom because I had this idea that you walk into the room, you make a big entrance because it's a big cape, and then you pull it off your shoulder and it crashes down on the ground and the bells all sound off. And I did a show at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London with Andrew Bolton. And we did a walkabout in the museum itself, and we had the cape. And Zaha Hadid was in the audience. And guess what? She wanted the cape because it was so dramatic.
Wow. Yeohlee, you described some of your clothes more as pieces of theater as much as garments.
Well, they can be anything, really. But yes, I agree with you. Some of it is, I like the drama of it as well as the usefulness of it. Why can't a dramatic piece of clothing be also extremely useful? Now, the first cape I ever made that enabled me to go into business for myself, I still make today, and it's part of Robert Mapplethorpe photographed it, and he photographed it as a headless woman, and he did that photograph for the exhibition at MIT. So we're going full circle, and it was such a dramatic piece. And when you see his photograph, you'll see the drama in it. But I'm still shipping it today, which means that it is still being sold today and worn today. And then the pièce de resistance on that piece is that one day when I was walking down the street, I saw a person wheeling a shopping cart who possibly was homeless. And I could tell from a distance that she was wearing one of my capes, and she was.
Wow. There aren't a lot of designs. When was it? When did you first design? When was this cape first designed?
1981.
That's 40 years ago.
Yes, sir.
And it's still being made now.
Yes.
That is not
true about. I can show it to you, but I won't.
That's kind of amazing. But it's a poignant story when someone is having a very hard life to see your clothing on them. Yes.
I just really was very moved.
Yeah.
Very moved by it. But it's I don't know what to say other than that. It humbled me.
But there must be other occasions when you're walking down the street and you see someone wearing something of yours.
Yeah, it does happen.
Have you ever seen someone and you disapproved of how they were wearing it?
No, but I've seen Andy Warhol turn 360 degrees to look at a back button coat that I made.
That's pretty great. That's pretty great.
It was a nice moment.
Really. Well, it must be just an extraordinary thing to see your work out in the world. I mean, every now and then, in very rare circumstances, I'll be on the subway. You remember when we rode the subway, and when I was writing magazine pieces, and you look over and someone's reading your piece.
Oh, that's wonderful.
It's really great, and you have to not be a 12-year-old and say, "I wrote that."
You know, I had a Keith Haring moment where I was reading something that was about him, and he ran over and did a sketch on it.
Oh man, your life is great. We should take some questions from the audience, okay?
Oh, okay, sure.
Okay, let me see what we got.
Thank you for the nice chat.
Oh, thank you. Oh, okay. How do you think the quarantine period might influence the future direction of fashion?
It's what I have been thinking about for a very long time, because the fashion world had fall collections in February. And I was busy sitting here thinking, what does the pre-post-COVID world look like? So I think it's a very interesting question, because I've seen some answers. There are people who believe that it'll be a joyous moment, lots of color, lots of fun. There are people who think that it's a serious moment, it's a utilitarian moment. And for me, you know, the jury's still out. I'm still thinking about it. I am making clothes. So I would say that for the most part, what the clothes I'm making have in common is extreme usefulness and design that I hope would comfort and cheer people up.
Yeah, I like that it's unknowable, and that both one answer and its opposite are equally plausible, that the clothing could be very somber to reflect what a hard time we've been through, or very colorful to reflect a sense of rebirth. They both make equal sense.
Yes, I think it's the truth of it is it's up to the wearer.
Oh, here's someone making optimistic about the corset comeback. It's shows like Bridgerton are showcasing corsets in new ways, and people are fascinated. Do you think this may influence what people wear when they go out after quarantine? What influence, more broadly, what influence does television have on fashion trends?
Did anybody watch the Grammys last night? Did you watch the Grammys last night?
I did not, no. It just makes me feel
the
a little
clothes
lighter.
were amazing. They were really, really amazing, and they run the gamut. I don't think that there's one way of dressing anymore. There are many, many ways of dressing. And I've had so many men come into the store and try on clothes and not really worry about whether it's for women or for men. So I think anything goes, and I think that a corset could be a lot of fun. You know, you really cinch your waist in, make a big bustle, and there you go. Put some feathers in your hair.
Yeah. It works to me. Well, I can think of I remember when Annie Hall came out, and because of that one movie, the fashions worn in that movie were suddenly everywhere.
Right.
But and so maybe Bridgerton, maybe corsets. Oh, here's a question about the connection between the garment district and the theater district, that the garment district has been the mainstay of the theater district as makers of costumes and fittings. Will the purveyors be there when the theaters open up again?
I certainly hope so. There is in particular a glove maker that I know that made gloves for everything, every show that you can imagine. And if anything had to be replaced, somebody from the theater district would run down there and say, they split that glove, can you sew it up? And I will find out if they're still around. I don't really know, but I hope so.
I hope so too. The theater district seems to still have the qualities you were describing for the garment district, that an actor will finish a show and walk down the street and there's 20 other actors, and there's a whole bunch of lighting people, and they're all your colleagues that are in other shows, and you can go have a drink with them. I'm insanely jealous. That just seems wonderful.
Yeah, perhaps there'll be a rebirth of the garment district.
I hope so. Here's a question. Yeohlee, you describe your philosophy of dress in terms of functionalism, but you also clearly have an aesthetic. What do you find beautiful? And beautiful is in quotation marks. What do you find beautiful in clothing?
Good proportions.
That's it?
That says a lot. A well-proportioned anything looks well on the person it's proportioned for and to. I believe in the magic of math, perfection.
Wow. Is there a movement for more environmental clothing?
Yes, I think so. I mean, there's a whole wave of zero wasters now. I remember when the cape that I told you about, that was my first cape that put me into business, was a zero waste design. And it was also a one size fits all. I was trying to be very efficient. I had this theory that if you made something that's one size fits all, you save rack space because you don't have to do SML. You can just do OS.
I think we have time for one more question, and here it is. It's another question about the connection between the theater and the world of fashion. Is costume shops were suffering before, and some anchors like Barbara Matera's closed down even before the pandemic. How will these times affect Broadway costuming?
I am not sure I have the answer because I think that it's an on-the-ground kind of survey. As long as you have the need and the hands that can provide the need, supply the need, right? They will go on, and the will to go on is very important as well. So it all depends on how the theater district comes back and how the garment district comes back, and whether the twain shall meet.
Well, I hope so.
Me too.
Yeah. Yeohlee, thank you so much for talking to me this evening. Let's bring back Tara Kelly, who will wrap things up.
Yes, I wanted to thank you, and I also wanted to thank our audience for being present. And Randy, you're terrific. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much to you both and to everyone for joining us. I learned so much about the fashion industry. And Yeohlee, I look forward to my first mushroom outfit designed by you. Thanks, Randy and Yeohlee, for your time and a wonderful conversation. We look forward to when this episode airs later on Northeast Public Radio. To our audience, you can listen to past episodes of this show by visiting personplacething.org or wherever you get your podcasts. For logistics on tonight's program, I want to thank my colleagues at MAS, in particular, Iana Angelo and Jacqueline Mualam, for all their hard work in pulling this event together. Our thanks extend also to Fred Wang on Yeohlee's team, who helped put this together. And I hope that if you're not already a member of MAS, you'll consider joining. Your membership dollars and donations help us to continue to provide programming like this and support our continued policy and advocacy work, such as our efforts to help protect and preserve the garment district. We hope you'll stay tuned for upcoming MAS programs and tours by visiting mas.org/events. And if you'd like to learn more about some of the women who've made their mark on both New York City and MAS history, join us for a series of tours, Women of MAS. Yeohlee is one of them, but we don't have a tour focused on her just yet. The first tour is going to take place on Thursday, March 18th at 6 p.m., focusing on Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, led by Deborah Zeltzer. And after listening to Yeohlee's reflections about her person, place, and thing, we hope that you will consider sharing your own stories through the Jane's Walks Festival, May 3rd through 9th, taking place in virtual and self-guided in-person formats. Anyone can lead a Jane's Walk, including you, Randy, and submissions are open through March 31st. Learn more about this volunteer-led festival of neighborhood storytelling by visiting mas.org/Jane's Walk NYC. Have a great evening and hope to see you next time.